live thing. So, bueno, ladies and gentlemen, pero primos, welcome to our Hanguiando episode. And today we have El Cuban Dude, Andy. So, welcome to Pero Let Me Tell You. And really, it's El Cuban Dude. I was telling him that on the way over here, I was talking to a friend and on my way to the studio, and he's like, oh, who are you interviewing today? I'm like, no, I'm interviewing El Cuban Dude. And he's like, no, who are you interviewing? I'm like, no, dude, El Cuban Dude.
Yeah, El Cuban Dude.
El Cuban Dude.
Yes,
and so I wanted to have you on the show because I love the content of your page. And for those of you who don't know your content, your page yet, tell us, what is your handle?
It's at El Cuban Dude on Instagram, or also El Cuban Dude on TikTok primarily. I got the Facebook stuff as well. That's just Cuban Dudes. Pero who checks that but old people, you know what I mean?
Facebook. Yeah. where there's funny because a couple of weeks ago we were talking about Facebook here on the podcast, and because Ish is still on Facebook. I haven't been on Facebook forever, but we were saying on how like ahora the people on Facebook son los viejos, and they don't comment with words, they comment with emojis.
They do.
And like glitter gifs, like a lot of glitter.
Yeah.
Like
those emojis where it's like it's like the one that like looks like the person, you know what I mean? With like the hearts in the eyes and stuff like that.
Yeah, like
those.
like the avatar.
Like the avatar ones,
right? And I'm like, you scroll the comment section and there's not one word said.
Yeah. My mom, that's my mom. And it even has highlights like she does. Yeah.
And lots of they hit gifs with like glitter and stuff like that, and I'm like, why can't they just write sentences?
For real.
They reverted back. No, we were laughing at that, the whole Facebook thing, that I don't know how we were saying, like how we were all on MySpace at one point, and then we all transitioned to Facebook. We just did
around 2007.
2007, 2008. No particular reason why. We were perfectly happy with MySpace, but we're like, all right, let's follow the cool kids, and we went on Facebook.
Right.
And then we left Facebook, but our parents stayed behind.
Right. I remember having to convince people back around 2009ish to switch over from MySpace to Facebook, and people were swearing by MySpace. They're like, what are you talking about? I'm never going on to that thing. And then like those same people a few years later were like, dude, thank you so much. It's like,
okay, but MySpace was way better.
I mean, it was funner.
It was. And that was still social media at its infancy. So people were like really nice. And it's like, look at the kids. Look at, whatever. Not what it's turned into.
You can pimp your space out.
That's exactly what we were saying. We were all coders.
Yeah, we were. Yeah.
Like I was saying, like, remember how many people on MySpace had like the Matrix theme? With like the wallpaper and
and I'm into like all this like metal stuff, so I'd have like all these like metal songs, like whatever. And I was like the cool guy on there. All my friends had all like the like the typical standard hip hop stuff, and I just wanted to like stand out. So like my page was like, you were coming into like the dungeon of Andy, you know what I mean? It was like super cool, and but I think Facebook, what it made it different was it was just about the content,
right?
And I think really that's what started to take over.
Hold on, because I didn't silence my phone.
Oh.
It's funny because I always tell people silence your phone. I didn't practice what I preach today. So you were a metalhead when you were a kid? As
I grew up.
Evident in your Metallica shirt?
I grew up as one just because I had an older cousin that was into all the 80s and 90s metal stuff. And I looked up to him. He was like 8-9 years older than me. So I'd be in his room and he'd have like, those like tower CDs. Those decks, those tower decks, full of like discs that were all types, but primarily rock and metal and this and that. Like Slaughter and like Megadeth and Slayer and Metallica and all this kind of stuff, whatever. So I got into it just because I wanted to like be cool like him, sort of. And at first, of course, it like hurt my ears. I had no idea what this even was. But over time, it kind of grew on me. And then it just became like part of the fabric of what. Now I did go through my hip hop stage in junior high with my pants down to here,
of course,
and and whatever, and wearing my colors and all that kind of crap. We've all been there.
The Tommy Hilfiger years.
The Tommy Hilfiger years. Like the hip, like the what was it called? Like the crisscross thing with the with the hoodie that was like purple and green and yellow and black or something like that. Cross colors or cross colors. I used to say colors because it was like colors, but like in British English. So I went through my phases and stuff, my preppy phases in high school, but all in all, I just always loved my rock and
I ask you that because like coming from Cuban parents or Latino parents, like heavy metal, like yo no quiero que tú seas rockero. Like I used to in high school, I had the pocket chain. To my mom, that was like if I was dealing drugs, like that was the end of the world. I'll never forget that one time. I did like rock music because we're about the same age. So when we were like in middle school and high school, that's like when rock, like, well, grunge, that's sort of when it made its So we, like our formative years, you could say, were like grunge heavy. And I'll never forget that. I've liked all types of music, but I remember that one day I was playing randomly on like my stereo really loud at Free Your Mind by En Vogue. And it has like a big guitar riff. And my mom busts into my room. Sí, te lo dije. Te has vuelto un rockero. And I'm like, Mom, this is En Vogue. Like, what the? And it was like really popular at the time, right? Yeah. And I'm like, but that, like, our parents always had this fear that you were going to become this like Satan worshiping, like rockero.
Well, I had so my cousin got me into Marilyn Manson.
Oh man,
which can't get any worse than that.
Did you ever see Marilyn Manson in concert?
Never. I wish I did during those days. I was too young, but I did see Metallica though, which was like a bucket list thing for me. But so, anyways, and I had a shirt that I saved up all my lunch money, and I bought this shirt in junior high. At the time there's no internet, you have to like save and then mandar the money through the mail and hope they send you the shirt and all that stuff and whatever. And it was the shirt that had Marilyn Manson like all like this.
Yeah.
And it said Antichrist Superstar.
Antichrist Superstar.
Dude, I had that shirt and I wore it to school. I don't know how many times. I never washed it once because I dare my mom never see that shirt.
So what, you would like put it in your book bag and when you got to school, you put it on?
Change, And one day my parents found it in the closet. Oh my God.
Andy, ¿qué tú haces con esto, Andy?
There was the talk when I got to the living room. My dad was waiting for me with the shirt like this, like whatever. And my mom was just like, it was almost like my mom was like in tears. And I was like, what the heck? What the hell's going on? Oh, what is the meaning of this? And I was like, dude, now I look back on it. I'm like, I get it. I get it from their perspective. But I mean, come on. It was like,
Yeah. I try to tell myself that when my kid is like reading anime that's like a little too mature for him, and I'm like, and then I'm like, wait, go back, don't freak out, this is how it was. No, my parents the same. Like it was like you were so afraid because I think obviously in part of it's the culture. It's a different culture, from when they were raised to how we were raised. So I think they have a hard time connecting that like you could like rock music, but not be like a Satan worshiping, rockero. Because that's what they saw in their eyes.
I played baseball in Miami when I was a kid, all the way from 8 years old, pretty much into high school when I started playing some in Sunset. And anytime I tried to take interest in anything else, like skateboarding or wanting to play the drums or something that was outside the scope of something traditional, like Cuban, sports, if you get what I mean. It was a problem. It was a problem with my parents.
Vas a ser un delincuente.
Vas a ser un delincuente, un drogadicto. I didn't raise you like this. This kind of stuff.
Well, that's a great segue to your content.
There you go. So making it easy for you, bro.
One of the reasons I wanted to have you on is because I found you or discovered you, or I don't know if I discovered you or you came across us. The point is through your podcast, El Cuban Dude podcast. And I really liked your podcast because it was live, which, especially me having come from, being in the podcast world, and ours has never been. We only had one live podcast one time. We've had a few live recordings, but they weren't like live, right? But yours was like live when it was happening. Yes, multicasted live, the real deal. And I'm like, whoa, my hat's to him, because God knows the disparate that we say when we record our show. And that's sort of where you caught my attention. And it's funny because at the very beginning, I didn't realize that you weren't in Miami.
Right.
So one of the things I really wanted to talk to you, in addition to your content, is that you've been one of the Miami, Cubans or Miami Latinos that really moved out of Miami. So how has that experience been for you? How was it adjusting from Miami to, you're in Gainesville now, to Gainesville? I mean, you're still in Florida, but you could might as well be in Mars,
Right, might as well. No, so we sold our house. Just to preface it, I was born in Cuba. We moved to Venezuela when we left. I left Venezuela when I was 5. And then I've been here ever since, right? And in 2021, from 1988 to 2021, right? I lived in Miami. 2021, we sold our house. We had a house out in Old Cutler. And we got the equity, and I told my wife, I was like, babe, it makes no sense for us to like buy here. I feel like we're going to zap our equity, So long story short, we're like, well, where do we go? Where do we go? What do we do? And through
because you had no ties in Gainesville, it was like literally where you go.
Yeah, my wife, we homeschool our girls, and my wife has some friends that happen to move up there. And my wife was like, hey, how do you guys like it? And they're like, oh my God, we love it. So we said, hey, why not Gainesville? It was like throwing a dart on a map. You know, why not Gainesville? And so we wanted to stay in Florida because of the parents, the in-laws, and all that stuff. We went up there, man, and we saw the acreage and the lands and everything, and the rest was history. But one thing that happened with us is I wasn't used to like the space. I'm used to it now, but I wasn't used to the open space.
Like open space in like your yard or in like the neighborhood?
Like the land,
everything.
The acreage, the open. Yeah, like we'd be driving with the realtor going to go see properties in like these different places, and I'd have like little mini panic attacks.
Right.
You know, I'd be like, dude, where are we going? Like, where's this woman taking us, dude? I was like, I used to tell my wife, I was like, we might as well call her and tell her to pull over because I ain't buying this crap.
Yeah.
Like, we're going a culo mundo. I have no idea where this is at. And it's just because I was used to like Miami, like everything being on top of each other.
Yeah.
In Miami, you have something on top of it, on top of it, on top of it, on top of it. Yeah, and like, I'm just used to
Density.
that. Density. I'm used to being a CVS in front of a Walgreens, in front of a this, in front of a that, in front of an Office Depot, in front of an Office Max, in front of a Staples.
Yeah.
Like, I'm used to that.
Yeah.
And over there, it was like so much open space, and it would freak me out.
You saw green.
I saw green. I was freaked out by it. Now I love it. Now when I come here, it's the opposite. Now I'm like, you know. But it took some adjusting, man. Yeah, it did take some adjusting, but I love it. And my girls in particular, they love it. They're the ones that basically asked me. Mm-hmm. They were like, Dad, you know, I want acreage, I want animals, I want to be able to have our like space, you know. And so we went up there, man, and the rest has been history. And the funny thing is that, you know, whenever there was a stint where we lived in Vegas for 2 years, my wife and I, before we had kids, professional reasons, right? She worked with children with autism, and the headquarters were over there. You know, long story, I don't want to get into that, but the point is that we lived out there. And when I was in Vegas, I became more Cuban than ever. Like, I was blasting like reggaeton and this and that, whatever, and driving down the street looking at people like with the face and like with the Miami faces. Where here, I was fed up with that shit. Mm-hmm. Here, I drive around and be like, yo, bro, I'm so tired of these people, this and that and the other, blah, blah. Gainesville, same thing. Cuban Dudes didn't start until I moved up to Gainesville.
Right.
It's like, it's in my pores, but when I'm here, I'm oversaturated.
Right.
When I go somewhere else, like Gainesville now, it just starts to come out of me.
I'm so happy you mentioned that because I talk about almost the same thing, but unless you've experienced it, you don't realize it. I was telling you outside that I went to law school up in Michigan, mm-hmm. and I talk about my Michigan experience all the time because it was such a culture shock coming from Miami, because I was born in Cuba too, but I came when I was a year and a half old. So
yeah, 9 months. I left when I was 9 months.
Right, so, but I didn't even do like you, that you lived in Venezuela for a few years, so you had a little mix up, you know, a little mm-hmm. detour there. Mm-hmm. And I think that most people that are born or raised in Miami, there comes a point that you're just over it, that you're over it, that you need some distance. Right. And the same thing happened to me. I was so over Miami. I was like, I fucking hate Miami. What's this bullshit? When I was up in Michigan, I'm like, I'm from Miami. Yeah. I'm Cuban. Right. Like, I'm not from Miami, Ohio. Like, listen, everyone, I don't care where you're from. I'm from Miami, Florida. Like, you know, the beach, you know? Right. And then it's you don't realize it until like you leave and there's some distance on it.
The sea of whiteness.
Yes.
Yeah. And then you look around and you're like, I'm tan and what? Like you love it. You know what I mean?
It becomes you're exotic.
Yeah, you're exotic.
Where is that accent from? And I'm like, I don't have an accent, bro. What are you talking about, an accent?
Yeah, supposedly.
Regardless, I don't have an accent. But yeah, I think you need some distance. But let me ask you this though. When you come back now, because your family is still down here, so obviously you're far enough that it's very well. It's different in Broward, but you're far enough that it's very different. But you're close enough that you're still in proximity. Mm-hmm. So I imagine that even when you come down now, there is some distance between the time you come. What do you notice are like the differences when you come down every few months or a few times a year?
It's just, I think like we mentioned before, it's just the density. The density. Miami's just very dense, man, and I see it more than ever. Just driving out here to the studio, I saw the traffic going westbound on the 874, and I was like, dude, what is this, man? It's like, it's always been bad. One of the reasons I also left, the traffic anxiety just got to me.
Yeah.
Having to wait 3 red lights to cross an intersection, bro. Yeah. Like I'd be like I'd start and my wife would sit next to me and be like, babe, you need to calm down. You know what I mean? And I couldn't, man. It's like I'd start sweating and I start moving and it was real anxiety.
Yeah.
You know, and I just couldn't deal with it anymore.
I tell people all the time that traffic here is so bad that like sometimes you have to make life decisions based on traffic. Because like, for example, if you live in West Kendall and you get like a job offer in downtown, that is, you have to make that decision based on the circumstances of your life, because you're going to be devoting at least 3 hours a day in traffic, like an hour and a half to go and an hour and a half to come back.
Right.
That sometimes, you know, if you have kids, if you have other commitments, like how do you, like you make life decisions based on the traffic flow in Miami. And it sounds really weird, but it's true. And like when people say like, oh, but it wasn't like this before the pandemic, I'm like, yeah, it was. Yeah, it's been like this for a long time. It was. I mean, it may have gotten, I mean, it's one of these things that like we can't believe. It's gotten to a point that it's like it can't get any worse, but then it does.
Yeah.
Like
I worked at Miami-Dade College Kendall campus. I was director of some. I worked in. Professionally, I work in IT. I was in some IT thing, and we lived in Cutler Bay, and from Cutler Bay to Kendall campus, on average, it was about an hour drive.
Right.
Every day. Now there was days where there just happened for some reason to be some crazy traffic,
and
bro.
we don't know why.
It was unexplainable, bro. Easily an hour and a half, close to 2 hours. Yeah. Easily. And I'd be meeting with like the CIO, you know, like really important people at the college, you know, whatever. And I'd show up and I'm like beyond embarrassed because I'm like an hour and a half late to a meeting. And she wouldn't even ever reprimand me. She would just be like, I understand.
Yeah,
you know? And I'd be like,
I mean, it's terrible. Like, I tell people, like friends of mine that are not from here all the time, like the traffic here is something else. Like, for example, LA has a really bad reputation for traffic. Have you ever driven out there?
I've never been to LA.
So I've driven just a couple of years ago. We do a series of episodes. We try to do every year, every other year of Pero let me tell you, out in LA, like we reach out to the community out in LA. Nice. So I've driven in LA. Yes, there's a lot of traffic and the highways have like, 50 lanes, right? But the traffic flows, right? Hay paraguería, right. People are surprisingly polite. That I remember the last time that Ish and I were there, I'm like, have you, and I don't know my way around LA. So I'm doing one of these like, oh shit, I got to get off there. Cañona, 5 lanes of traffic and nobody honks. I'm like, in Miami, they would have like T-boned me.
They would have got in front of you and not let you into that.
Yeah. So it's like traffic here is something else. So, let's get to your content, because really your content is what I love. About. So you sort of morphed the podcast into just like more content. Are we going to see the podcast come back, or for now you're just going to?
So really quickly, the name Cuban Dudes actually came from a food truck we had in Gainesville.
Which I got to mention something to you about that in a minute.
So we had a food truck in Gainesville, a Cuban food truck, and we were killing out there, man. We ran for 2 years. Everybody swore by our food truck. I mean, even the students would bring their parents up from Miami when they would come visit for graduation. You guys have to eat this place. We'd get a lot of skeptics. People be like, esto una mierda, seguro. I'm from Miami. They eat our stuff and be like, oh my God, this it would like blow their minds, because my wife's cooking, my brother-in-law also cooks really well. So anyways, the name Cuban Dudes came from that. We folded because we didn't have time. Like we mentioned before, we're the only ones up there, families in Miami. But I wanted to keep the name going. So then we started the podcast. I thought the name Cuban Dudes was pretty cool. I didn't want it to die. And in reality, people would come eat our food because they wanted to eat our food, but also to meet us. It was like they wanted to meet Mickey Mouse, and then they also happened to want to eat a Cuban sandwich afterwards.
I mean, it's the only logical reason.
It was kind of the way it would work. Yeah. They'd show up and they'd be like, "Oh my God, I love you. I love your content. Oh my God, let me get una croqueta preparada." That's kind of how the way it would go. So I created a following from just my stupidity. The way that I advertise our content was hilarious. People would love it. People would kill just for like the latest thing that I talk about, making fun of the local competition, all this kind of stuff. But
the local Cuban sandwich competition in Gainesville. I was going to be.
There is none. There really is none, to be honest.
The Cuban sandwich, El Cubano sandwich from McDonald's.
There is none. There is none. I don't even want to mention the
place.
By
the way, don't you get upset when they call it El Cubano?
El Cubano. I can't.
It's not. It's a Cuban sandwich.
Yeah.
Nobody says that.
In our menu, it was written Cuban, and then it was spelled SANWEECH. Sandwich. It was a Cuban sandwich. So. Anyways, so I didn't want the name to die, so I kind of turned that into the podcast, and I wanted to capture the attitude of what it was in our content, which was very Cuban, very Miami, very out there, and talk about Gainesville stuff, but that dried up quick. So then we jumped to Miami things. We started meeting a lot of people, very interesting people, and so my partner on the podcast, Abel Cepeda, he kind of went his own way because I'm a little ADHD. So one day I'm over here, one day I'm over there, one day I think this is cool, one day I think it's not. And I think he fell victim to that. And so he left, and I said, "Coño, you know what? I'm just gonna wrap this up. Yeah, let Cuban Dudes kind of fade into the sunset. It is what it was." And for some reason, I just thought of a last second Hail Mary. I said, you know what? F it. I'm gonna go ahead and just do me. what I've always been, really just me, and I'm just gonna put content out there, see what happens. And bro, I went from
really
like 3,000 followers to like the 17 that I have now, or almost 18,000 soon. But dude, it felt like in about a month.
Because you hit.
Yeah,
Like,
and it was organic, and
it's
felt
organic.
amazing.
It's always organic. Yeah. And I mean, obviously I love your content, but how does the because you have so much of it, like, is it just like random things that, pop into your head? Like,
I think it's the ADHD blessing. It's also a curse, but it's also a blessing. Like, I'm in the shower just soaping up, and I'm like, coño, bro, you know what? Oh yeah, you know what? This, and then I just like, I manifest it in my brain, and then I go out and I just like record it. My wife looks at me like I'm crazy. She's like, where are you going, babe? I'm going to la casita de la atrás. I'm gonna just turn on the camera and record something really quick.
Yeah.
And it's just funny,
just by your content and all the grass, we know you're not in Miami. or maybe he could have been in horse country. Right, that would have been the only exception,
that's why I do a lot of green screen, just to like keep people from guessing kind of where I'm at. But a lot of people know. I never shied away from saying that I'm not in Miami. You know what I mean?
Yeah. Side note or sidebar. I was speaking earlier today to Seth Burger Beast. He's like family to us. Yeah. And I told him, somebody else I told, I'm going to go interview a Cuban Dude. And he's like, the guy with the food truck? And he's like, oh yeah, he asked me to be on his show, but I guess you guys never like connected.
Yeah. And I think he made a tour through Gainesville not too long back ago, and he wanted to stop by our place, but it happened to be on a day where we were off, and I was like, it didn't line up.
He's tremendo pesado. No, we love him. I always say that Seth is the nicest asshole you'll ever meet. Yeah. He's
those are the best kind of people, though.
Oh my God, like Seth I mean, it could be now we're talking about stuff.
I'm a dick too, so
he's a dick, but you love him. You end up loving him, and it's like, I love this guy.
Yeah, that's my wife.
So you did a sketch recently or content recently that I have to tell you, it was funny, but maybe you did it with that intention, or maybe you didn't, or maybe it just turned out that way.
Tell me.
The Radio Mambi one.
Oh, okay.
When I saw that content, so it was a content about like kids in the 80s and 90s where they would listen to on the way to school with their parents. When I heard aquí Radio Mambi, it was so like, it took me back. I got actually a little like nostalgic, like sad, like oh my God, I'm like in my parents' car, like that one, because that's the thing with content, that some of it, when you're a content creator, some things are funny and great, but then some things like just hit in the chest, like, right. And I was like, wow, like, I don't know what the thought process of that was, like, if it was just random, but that one in particular, like, I was transported back to that. I'm like, I still know all the song, like, what en noticias la primera, la mejor programación, la primera en arbitro, Radio Mambi, si es cubana.
It was that.
And I played it to my parents, and my parents was like, coño, se la comió. Yeah. And I was like, yeah, this was great. So tell us a little bit about that skit. Like, what was the inspiration about it? That one was amazing.
That one's like one of like my top ones. So I always had an idea of doing that bit, but the original idea was doing it in the bed. So I was like waking up almost like in my He-Man underwears. The alarm was going off and Radio Mambi was going off. Because in reality, most of us, some of us heard it in the car, but a lot of us heard it in the morning. The minute the radio would go off at 6 a.m, when Bobby was waking up to go to work, you know what I mean? It was the Radio Mambi jingle at that moment in time. And it would wake us up to get ready to, wash up or whatever before going to school. But I said, coño, I could never do that. I could never pull that off. I'm not, whatever. Even if I was a little kid, that's inappropriate. I'm like, that's weird. I said, where else can I do this? So I said, coño, in the car. You know what I mean? Because that was another one, right? So in the car, that's kind of where it went. And the idea, I always had to do it. I had it in the back of my mind. I kind of slotted it there. I never really paid much attention to it. I just left it as one of these days I'll figure it out. But my sister messages me one day around the time that I did the bit, and she goes, coño, you know what you should do? The Radio Mambi stuff that Mommy and Papi used to always play. And I said, coño, you know what? She brought it to the forefront. And I said, coño, let me really think about this. And bro, it's like I said, my ADHD magic. I just was like this, kind of thinking about it, and it was just like, boom. You know what? In the car. So I walked out, I grabbed my book bag, you know, whatever. I grabbed the chair, I sat out there, whatever. And I was just like, and it's funny, bro, because I script this stuff in my head. I script the sound, I script the music.
Papi,
I
viste
script
los
everything.
Marlin.
Yeah. The whole thing is scripted in my head. And then I just act it out, you know, with the phone. It's really weird how that happens. You know, you just kind of script it. And it was just like, cause you know, when I say, Papi, viste los Marlin, I have to hear my dad's head in my voice in my head going, oh, cállate, coño, you know, whatever. But that's all real. That's all true, you know? And it's funny because my content is not like some other people that make a lot of Cuban-based content, which is like very over the top and very like aggressive or very nasty. Like I could do that. I could be like, coño, beep, beep, beep. I could say all these things. But in reality, it's rooted a lot in a lot of nostalgia.
Yeah.
And it's rooted a lot in a lot of realism.
Yeah.
Like I would say 90% of everything I put out is based on truth.
I was going to say, I think that because there's a lot of Miami-based and Cuban-based content, but I think that your angle, whether you organically went down that route or it was intentional, is, comedy, all that, irony, but a little bit of nostalgia that really hits home.
Yeah, because for me, I remember telling my wife back in the days, I'd be like, babe, I want to make content, but I feel like I'm too dark. I'd be like, I'm too, like, I even mentioned it.
Rockero con Metallica.
Bro, I even mentioned it in the podcast one day with Abel. I said, Abel, I would love to make funny TikTok videos, but I'm not going to go out and be like, I'm Cuban and I like rice and beans.
Yeah.
I'm Cuban. And of course I'm late to the party. Like I go, I'm not gonna really do that, dude. Like I'm not that guy. I'm too like dark, you know?
Yeah.
So
could have fooled me.
No. What ended up happening was it manifested into realism. You know, I said, coño, if I'm gonna do this, I'm just gonna really be me. So in my head, I was reaching into like, what are these things that have happened to me? Like El Tío telling me off when I got to a party. Oh, mira como mierda, you know, like that's real. You know, you know, the Radio Mambi. My mom, I walking out, I'm fixing my hair. My mom, tú vas a salir así sin peinarte ese pelo. You know what I mean? Like all those things are real things, and that's where I found my sweet spot. You know what I mean?
Definitely.
And yeah, so that's kind of how that works.
Where did you get that audio?
Which one?
The Radio Mambi audio.
Believe it or not, I found it on YouTube.
Really?
Yeah, I found it on
was
YouTube.
like, how did he get the whole thing?
I found it on YouTube, bro. And if you look back in the history of my feed, there is one where all I do is play the actual video. And I kind of like I downloaded it from YouTube. I play it on one of my things, and I'm like, oh my God, I created a time machine. But that's like old, like that's archaic. You got to go way back in my feed to find it. And I just said, you know, if I'm going to do this, I'm going to use the same audio, you know? So I used it and it worked, man. It really was unbelievable to me the way that it took off, really. I mean, to be honest, it really surprised me.
I mean, you're telling me about like our lemon and lime video. I don't know if you saw.
I did.
What happened with that? Like,
I did see it. I thought it was hilarious.
It's funny because when we put out that video, I didn't think that video was any worse or any better than anything else we do.
Right.
It was, you know, it was just in the same level of anything else we do. And then it took off. And I'm like, what the hell? Like, you know, that's why you never know. Like, you never know what's going to hit. Sometimes you think you're like, oh, bro, this is going to be the best thing. Yeah. And it does okay. And then some stuff you think is shit and it takes off.
Yeah.
But the Radio Mambi one, you know, listeners and viewers, if you haven't seen it, check out his page. Do you have it pinned?
I do have it pinned. It's one of my top
check it out. Videos. So it's one of his top ones because really, like, it doesn't matter who you are, you know that jingle, that Radio Mambi jingle.
Got so many people feeling nostalgic. Literally, people writing on the feed like, oh my God, this made me cry. I was like, what?
It did. Like, it made me sentimental, and I'm like, why am I getting sentimental over the Radio Mambi theme?
You know what I think it was, DJ? I think honestly, man, it was like when I analyze it myself. I think it was just the little things about what I ended up creating there. I think it was like me, like looking out the window. You know what I mean? Like I'm sitting in the car. Those are the small things that really make it real. And I think the sound.
Trying to talk to your dad.
Yeah, trying to talk to my dad. And I'm like, shut up! I'm listening to the intro. You know, like you know, those things are the very small things that I think really hit people.
Yeah,
you know what I mean? And
because we've all been in that car.
Yeah,
on our way to school.
I'm proud to have made that. To be honest,
the big two in my house was Radio Mambi, obviously, y FM 92.
Betty Pino?
Betty Pino. Oh, yeah. We even went to, back in the day in the 90s, they had this award show called Aplauso 92. Which
I remember that.
You remember that? Which was like I guess the American music. It was an award show based on the radio station, and we used to go to that like if it was a freaking Oscars. Like, you know, my mom would buy a nice blouse.
Oh my god!
And we'd go to the Miami Arena.
Yeah,
like back in the day.
Oh my god, that's crazy, man. She go to Lurias.
Of course, Lurias. My parents always liked Lurias more than service merchandise.
Oh, service merchandise was the bomb, though, man. It had the little finger globes at the time. You'd be like, oh my
I think
god,
service merchandise was bigger.
Yeah, that's true. You remember Incredible Universe?
Of course.
That was amazing.
In, down south, yeah.
Down south, yeah.
I remember you needed a little card to get in.
Yeah. It was like a club membership.
And there was a lot of purple. Am I mistaken?
Purple and like yellow or something.
Yeah, it was the 90s.
Yeah. We thought Best Buy was never going to do better than Incredible Universe. And then Best Buy killed it.
No. That's like, it's funny because now that we're talking about electronics, I saw a meme the other day that it's great for people our age. That remember when you used to go to like that family member or friend's house that had the big, like, remember those big TVs that had like the projector? And you were like, esta gente tiene dinero. Look at this fancy TV they had. And those TVs were shit. Yeah. Like, what were they? They were projection TVs, right? That's what was the name of it?
I think so.
That was a piece of shit, but they were so big. And it's like, well, these people tienen dinero.
Like my cousin had a Sega CD, and I thought I was like, oh, dude, they're rich. You know what I mean?
Hey, ¿qué te iba a decir? I love also the Thoughts of a Cuban, you know.
Oh my god, yeah.
Those are great.
Cuban American thoughts.
Yeah, those are great. So those just randomly pop up.
That's another one that just I was like, how the hell did this do so well? Like I was just like in my bedroom. I mean, the first one you could literally tell I'm in my bedroom, and I'm just like this idea just comes to my head, and I'm like taking videos of myself pretending like I'm thinking, and then I'm just doing the voiceovers, and they're all just kind of manifested in my head, and I'm just like recording them. A few of them, of course, I had to think, but it was just like coming out. It was just like it just comes out, and I put it together, bro. I sliced it together, and I just put it out there. And in my mind, I'm like, okay, 1,000, maybe 2,000, maybe. That was almost like 500,000, and I'm like, dude, that's just insane. You know what I mean? Because
what do you find, especially like living in Gainesville, is like the biggest misconception about like Cubans, like Cuban or Cuban Americans? You know, what do you think people are like? Either they go with stereotypes or they just have it wrong.
I don't like.
Are real.
I don't like. Are you asking me from a white perspective? Like what Americans think?
Yeah.
Well, I don't like that Americans think that they know more about Cuba than we do.
Yes.
That pisses me off.
Yeah.
When I was in the food truck and they'd be like educating me about like where the Cuban sandwich came from and this and that and the other, I'd be like, dude.
They were educating the guy who was selling them the Cuban sandwich, called the Cuban Dude.
yeah, telling me the authenticity about Cuban bread in Tampa and this and that and the other and yada yada, but they're like schooling me, and then they're telling me about Cuban politics and things, and I'm like, and of course, I'm a professional. I'm selling food, whatever. I'll be like, oh yes, sir, no sir, whatever. But in my head, I'm like, I'm just like. Really,
the healthcare.
Yeah.
The healthcare.
I don't
the
like
literacy rate.
Yeah, I didn't like it.
Cuba has the highest literacy rate. They go, well, they read, but they are not allowed. They are not allowed to read what they want. So that's a trade-off.
Yeah. And in Gainesville, one day I had some crazy bum come up to me talking about, how much he loves the fact that Cuba has free healthcare, and I was like, man, personajes. What are you gonna do?
It's funny when you hear stuff like that. Like I know. As you grow older and more mature, I subscribe to pick your battles, but sometimes I have a hard time not picking that battle.
I know.
Sometimes I have a hard time. I'm like, like it's really, really, because I get really frustrated, and I've talked about this on the show several times that like we're supposed to listen to everybody else and their traumas and their lived experience, but when it comes to ours, it's like. We tell you, hey, this is what's going on over there. This is what people living over there are going through. This is what we went through that lived over there. But, somehow.
This is played out. It's already old news. It's like, of course, Cuba, you guys are communists. Of course, it's not something hot and spicy and sexy, maybe that's what it is. I don't know.
I hope, Andy, I know the answer to this, but I just have to say it. I hope that when you're selling your Cuban sandwiches in Gainesville, they did not have salami.
Hell no.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't doubt you for a minute.
I was vehemently against that. There was always a joke about sans salami. I even when the Florida Panthers won last year, when they beat the Tampa Bay Lightning, I was like, there was a I think like a story that I had put where they were getting a beat down. It was like the Panthers and the Lightning were fighting, whatever. And I said, Team San Salami beat the hell out of the salami, whatever. And like I just like I always made a big joke about the whole salami thing because to me, I was like, a Cuban sandwich doesn't take salami. Like that's just not a thing. But that's where you get the people in Gainesville going, but in Tampa, the original Cuban. And I was like, oh Lord, it was always a thing.
You know what I think? If you want a Cuban sandwich with salami, then order a Cuban sandwich and tell them to add salami. That's it. But it doesn't have salami.
Yeah. But don't get me wrong, I love salami.
I love salami too. I mean, I'm not hating the salami.
Yeah, but it's just not a Cuban sandwich. It does not have salami in it, dude.
I mean, I guess it's a good rivalry. I mean, if that's going to be our rivalry, I'm okay. Yeah. I'm okay. It's funny because in Tampa, they have that restaurant in Colombia.
No, I haven't gone to it.
Yeah, it's right Ybor City. It's called El Colombia. It's I think it's the country's oldest Spanish restaurant.
Oh, I have heard of it. Yes.
Yeah. But Spanish as like in España, right? España. And then next to it, they have La Segunda Bakery, which the Cuban bread.
That's where the bread
is fire. Like it really is. But it's funny because the Cuban sandwich is like a completely different way. And they have on the menu like this whole explanation about the history of the Cuban sandwich.
And the leaf and the thing on the bread.
I'm like, it's fine. I had it. It's good. Yeah. It's not the Miami Cuban sandwich.
Yeah. Well, in Gainesville, you get a lot of people going like, oh, did you drive to Tampa to get this bread? I'm like, of course I did. In my head, I'm like, I went to Publix. I got this from Publix.
They have Cuban bread in the Publix up there?
It was all right, dude. To me, the Cuban sandwich is about a toque. The way that we do the butter with the press, with the thing. Yeah. You could get the fanciest Cuban bread and this and that. And if you don't do the sandwich right, so you don't let that toque right, it'll taste like crap, in my opinion. That's my opinion.
You have to go to, if you go to LA, have you heard of Porto's Bakery?
Yes, I have.
Okay. We love Porto's Bakery. We had her on the show. And what I love about Porto's Bakery is that, well, you haven't been to LA, so I haven't seen it. Those bakeries they're unlike anything I've ever seen. They're beautiful and they're enormous. And there's hundreds of people in those bakeries. They kind of look like a really fancy food hall. Like they're that big. They're an institution in the LA area, like in the vicinity. And great story, they left like she was making cakes in Cuba and like stashing the money, and then she was saving it to come here. And I think they were in Miami for like a little bit, but then they moved to LA. And then they opened up a Cuban panaderia in LA. Every Cuban in LA has a link to Porto's. Every Cuban, because there's not that many, so the community is really tight. And in the West Coast, what I find is, because I have friends of mine that they live here now, but they were LA Cubans. They had a lot of the social clubs, which here in Miami we really didn't, because Miami is an entire Cuban social club. Right. So they had a lot of those Cuban social clubs in like the 70s, especially, and 60s. So that's why Cubans over there, they all know each other, right? And they all have a tie to Porto's. But the reason I'm bringing this up is because, obviously they had to expand, because the Cubans are they're not even a minority. They're like the 1% of the 1% over there. So obviously they had to cater to the larger community, especially the larger Latino community, which is fine. I totally get that from a business perspective. But it's funny because whenever we go, like Ish and I have gone, and again, they've been amazing to us, we say our Cuban ancestors are rolling in their grave, because like they don't call it un pastelito de queso. It's a cheese strudel. They don't call it una carne con papa. It's a potato ball. Un pastelito de guayaba y queso es un refugiado. And I'm like, nobody calls it that. Like, and when I've gone there, I'm sorry, I can't call it a cheese strudel. I'm like, I will have a pastelito de queso. And they're like, huh? I'm like, a pastelito de queso. I'm like, my Cuban ass will not call it a cheese strudel. I'm like, that sounds like Swiss. Like, never. Get cheese strudel. And like their Cuban bread is some artisanal like loaf of bread with like flour dusted on in the front. And I'm like, what? And it's good. Like the food is fire. But I'm like, my Cuban heritage and my Cuban ancestors are rolling in this grave. No. I'm like, bro, just keep the name.
Yeah. Yeah. When we had the food truck, we sold papas rellenas, and we sold big ones and little ones. So we call the big one the little one, we'd call it la papita, because it was little. So we'd be like, dame una papita. And the big one, we were like, well, what do we call the big one? We're like, well, let's call it la papota. So we'd get these gringos to go up to the truck and be like, can I have a papota? And bro, every time we'd be like ringing them up, of course, with a straight face, but inside, man, I was dying of laughter.
So how many times, especially with your food truck, did you get asked, "Oh, is your food spicy?"
There was a couple of times. There was also a couple of times where people would say if we sold nachos and like Mexican stuff. Yeah, I mean, we'd get that. We'd get that sometimes, but luckily most times we didn't. And I think it was like the Florida factor. You know what I mean? I think if Cuban Dude's food truck was like in Kansas City, probably most times we'd be like, but no spice, But I think people, because we're in Florida still, most people knew what Cuban food is,
Is your food caliente?
Yeah.
No, our food is not caliente.
Yeah, but no. And it's not. It's crazy because I actually love spicy food. I'm one of those Cubans that love spicy food.
Right, but our food is not
our food
typically
is not.
spicy.
Right.
Yeah, with this whole like cultural appropriation now that everything is cultural appropriation nowadays, like I don't care if like somebody who's not Cuban like learns how to do legit Cuban food. The more the merrier. If you learn how to do it, great. But don't freaking give me a taco with black beans and cilantro and call it a Cuban taco, because that's a unicorn. That doesn't exist.
Right.
Like nobody eats that.
No.
I don't think my parents had ever seen a tortilla until they came to the US.
Well, worse yet, dude. Don't give me a burrito or taco, call it a Cuban something, and it has no seasoning in it.
Right.
Because when we do tacos, when we do burritos, it's seasoned to the hill.
Right.
It has all this stuff, whatever, and it tastes like amazing. You know what I mean? I always used to tell my wife, I was like, these people are lucky that we actually don't take on like the Mexican food version of Cuban stuff. Because when we decide to do Mexican version of like the way we season things, I mean, it's my opinion, okay? I could be wrong, right? But it's amazing. Because I always feel like a lot of other cultures, they do for the pure taste, the cilantro, and I respect that. But we season the hell out of things, and whenever we season it, people notice. The minute they bite into it, they're like, "Oh my god," And I never have that reaction when I eat a taco, when I eat una arepa, or nothing. It's more like, okay, this is good. I enjoy it.
So, Andy, the most important question of the evening as we wrap up: picadillo, raisins or no raisins?
No raisins, bro.
It's funny. I grew up without raisins as well. So when this whole raisins or no raisins thing came out, I'm like, who the hell puts raisins in their picadillo?
For real.
But apparently there's a big part of the population that does.
I grew up without raisins.
Pones aceituna.
Aceituna. Did your mom put papa in a picadillo?
Sometimes.
I'm not a big papa in a picadillo fan. Were you a fan of it? Did you enjoy it?
I didn't like picadillos. I didn't like any picadillo.
Really?
No.
Damn, your mom's picadillo. I mean, I don't want to talk crap about Mama DJ, but it must have not been that great.
No, see, the thing is, and this is probably I think not only Cuban, Latino kid grew up with this. I always tell people that, like, now it's, again, nostalgic, but you know how, like, I don't know, in American movies or TV, you see kids waking up in the morning to like, the bacon and the pancakes. I'm like, no, every single morning when, you're kind of waking up to go to school, that, you're awake but not awake, and I see that you're in between awake and being asleep. I'm like, ahí está mi haciendo sofrito. At 7 in the morning.
Yeah.
I'm like, I will kill I would do anything, my grandmother's passed on, but to smell her sofrito. But that, when you're in the bed and you're all cozy and, your senses are very sensitive because you're waking up and it's like, I'm like, oh. Ahí está mi. She would, coger el ajo verde and burn it in the stove top, and then it's
And your friends at school would smell your shirts and be like, "Wait, you live in a restaurant or something like that?"
No. It's just my grandmother, right? So the whole raisins on the picadillo. It's how the other side lives, I guess.
But I will tell you, I've had raisins in my arroz con leche at Versailles in particular. Okay, and it was the bomb.
But that's a dessert.
But for the most part, I'm anti-raisin on anything, even on my arroz con leche. Yeah. So there was one exception.
But the thing with raisins in picadillo that doesn't make sense to me, and you had a Cuban food truck, so you would, about Cuban flavor profiles. Cubans don't do the sweet and savory.
We don't, right? We don't.
Right, in a dish, in an entree.
Well, we also do platanitos, though.
Right, but platanitos is a side.
Oh, true. You mean in the main?
Yeah.
Okay. Gotcha.
It's a side.
Gotcha.
But so I'm like, this is not consistent. I mean, I know we'll probably get a lot of hate and a lot of like stuff from people. It's fine. I'm not saying they're wrong, right? I'm not saying they're wrong, but I'm like, wow, apparently there's a whole other half that had raisins in there, tenían pasas en el picadillo.
I don't know. I don't even know why that was ever even a thing though. Like, I don't get it.
Oh, but it's a thing. Every time.
I bet you those people like salami and they're Cuban too.
We don't judge. We try. We listen. We don't judge.
Yeah.
Nobody's perfect.
Yeah, nobody is perfect.
Anyway, so tell our listeners again. Your handle is
El Cuban Dude on Instagram and on TikTok. So it would be like at a little ampersand at El Cuban Dude. El Cuban Dude on Instagram. And if you guys want to check it out on YouTube, El Cuban Dude's show is still on YouTube. I still have all the episodes there, and I might revisit that sometime in the future. But for right now, it's just up there. But everything is Cuban Dudes or El Cuban Dude.
Yeah, and keep. I mean, you're doing really, really well. So obviously, keep doing what you're doing because, like, I love it to see other people that are from here and they're like raised like us in the same place like us. Like, I love when everybody is doing well and everybody's like really, doing content that's authentic and real because, something we've always talked about so much here on the show is like, especially whether it's like the Cuban experience or the Latino experience, you could tell right away when it's not authentic, when it's somebody else writing it because it's so watered down and generic. Ish and I always sort of make fun of the, when cuando Americanos want to do Latino content and they're like, oh, this fiesta is caliente. I'm like, nobody speaks like that. Like, I can assure you, nobody speaks like that. So I love it when like, content creators like us, like the real deal are putting stuff out there. And, in your particular case, as we were talking about, it's funny, it's ironic, but it has like such a like shot of nostalgia that, especially nowadays with how crazy things are, it's like nice to have an escape on that type of stuff. So,
so
congrats.
And I appreciate that. And but on the other side of the coin, you also get some people that are Cuban that are legit, but they're like, it's like too forced. It's too like, I don't even know how to put the word. It's just like, it's like too blatantly in your face, over the top Cuban. It's almost like niche, and it's not really like, and even that is also on the other side of the coin, a little bit of like a turn off. Cause you're like, damn dude. Okay. I know we could be like that. I know we could be that way, but that's not really who we are as people. What I mean?
But I also think that with what you're saying is that there's a lot, and look, with social media and all that, there's something for everybody, right? Everybody has something to bring to the table. The audience is limitless, if you will. But I think there's a lot of content creators that just, I don't want to say copy, but it's like they do the same thing that somebody else is doing.
Yeah, that's true.
But they take it up a notch. So that's why you end up with like really exaggerated versions of something.
Yeah, likely, yeah.
That it's like, okay, this is funny, but I've seen this like 10 other times before. Like I've seen the Chonga girl like 100 times now.
Right.
It's funny, but like I'm not seeing anything new here. Right. I always say, remember, there's two OGs. Do you remember? And I think that every single Miami content creator sits on their shoulders. Do you remember A Pair of Nuts? Jamil and Johnny. A Pair of Nuts. They used to do Gayo.
Yes.
¿Te acuerdas Gayo? La mayonesa de los gays.
Yeah, la mayonesa de los gays.
Fuck Me and Diaz. The law firm of Fuck Me. Like these people were doing this.
Right,
like,
Los Beachy Boys and stuff?
No, they were even before this.
Oh, really?
They were doing this like 2007, 2008. Jamil and Johnny. And they were like the OG content creators. Y después you remember a few years after that, it's like 2010, Shit Miami Girls Say?
Oh, yeah.
That was, because that was before things went viral.
Right.
Like, I still watch that and I'm like, how the hell did they put Miami culture in like a 4-minute video? Like,
yeah.
Every like Salmon. I have the Salmon.
Yeah.
He has a boat. I love when she goes, I'm just going to go to FIU.
Yeah. No. Those people, they come over
like sometimes you get great ideas, but people just either copy them or all that, and then you end up with like really, as I said, exaggerated versions. But that's not what you're doing here. That's not what any of us are doing. Like your stuff is, I love it. I love it.
I appreciate that, man.
I look forward to it. Sometimes I look forward to see la cara que tú pones, like.
and you know, and sometimes you do get so real. So did you see the last one that I made by any chance?
What?
So I'm talking to a contractor, and I'm like, oye, so you know, Wilfredo, ¿qué tú piensas en pintarme la casita? Wilfredo's like,
I have seen it.
You know, and I'm like doing this, and in my head, I'm realizing, I'm self-reflecting, like third person, that some Cuban's gonna look at me and be like, dude, why are you making fun of our own people? You know what I mean? And I'm like, but this is very real. Like when you boil it down, sometimes it just sounds like we sound that way. You know what I mean? And I'm like, so there's always that gray line too, where you're like, you want to be very real, very authentic, but do I want to like really piss people off? You know?
It's your truth, and what you said there is true. Like,
correct.
You know,
so screw it. Might as well just do it.
You know,
let's roll.
The contractor that comes like, oh yeah, you know, el techo, mira eso, eso está Mickey Mouse ahí. You know, that was a fun one. Explaining one time to an American friend of mine, what does Mickey Mouse mean? I'm like, it's not the mouse.
Oh my god, that must have been a great conversation.
I loved the one you mentioned. That's one of your recent ones. The one of the party. El bobo,
el tío. You're like, hola tío.
Yeah, because that's so real.
Oh, that's so my real. Uncle, bro. That's my uncle.
That's so real. That's like now, you know, my kid is 10. Whatever, you know, family or whatever sees him, like, pero qué grande tú estás, you know, como has crecido. I'm like, you saw him a month ago. Like,
está fuerte.
Or my personal favorite, not at 10, maybe at like 12. Oye, debes tener todas muchachitas atrás de ti. I'm like, all of them, all of Riviera Middle School.
Oh my god, yeah.
And it's like the same shit over and over again. And then it's funny when you catch yourself doing that.
You become the uncle.
Yeah, that you're like, I see some of my friends' kids. I'm like, oh, you're so big, and I'm like, fuck, I just did it.
It's a circle of life.
What I hated when they would tell me, like, I just did it. Damn it. So anyway,
it's a rite of passage,
bro, thank you so much for coming.
Thanks for having me, bro. I appreciate you having me, man.
Whenever you want. Whenever you're coming to Miami, aquí tienes tu casa.
Dale, bro. I appreciate it.
We loved having you, and I'm really happy we made this happen. So everybody go check out El Cuban Dude, like really El Cuban Dude, and you'll have a great time. So see you later, guys.